Hello and welcome to today's episode of Platinum Talks Wealth. Emmy Nominated journalist Jennifer Rogers Markwell changed gears in her television career when she realized the need to help women make sense of investing. She regularly hosts educational workshops to empower women and others to take charge of their financial future. Now, join your host, Platinum Wealth Management President Jennifer Rogers Markwell, as she leads us into the world of money memories, money infidelities, and how these can mold our relationship with our personal finances as adults. Let's dive into today's episode.
Hi, it's Jennifer Rogers Markwell. You're joining us on the Platinum Talks Wealth podcast. I'm joined by Kerstin Trachok today, and we're talking about attachment styles. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thanks for joining. And I know you and I talked before, but we didn't go into in-depth on attachment styles. So I feel like I'm always learning of them going as well. So there's 4 separate ones.
Yes.
What are they? How do people fit in? How does it work?
Absolutely. So what attachment styles is how we interact with people in relationships. And this is based off of our early childhood development. So how our primary caregiver interacted with us to create a sense of safety and connection with other individuals. So of course that then translates to us as adults in our adult relationships, and also can have a really large impact on how we spend our money or how we see the world, all of those things. So the 4 styles are secure attachment, anxious preoccupied, avoidant dismissive, and disorganized/fearful or avoidant. With the secure attachment, it's exactly as it sounds. So a secure attachment from very early on in childhood is that your caregiver was there, they were attentive, you felt safe. And so that develops a secure adult who then feels very secure in their relationships. They feel totally safe being emotional with others and developing emotional relationships. And then the way that translates to their finances is they feel very comfortable, secure in their finances, open to suggestions and guidance, and more willing to, have structure with it, not being distrustful.
That's interesting, because saying that, I can't imagine a lot of people fall in that category, or do they?
They don't. No. So secure attachments are, I wouldn't say necessarily a totally rare, but they definitely are. At least in my field, of course, I see far less secure attachments than I do the other styles. So yeah, this is, again, not that every childhood is perfect, but this is where, somebody really had a secure attachment style themselves, so they could be very secure with their children. The good thing about it, though, is that we all can be secure down the line. It just takes us recognizing, what attachment style we might be in, doing the work to get more into the secure attachment.
So it's possible to lean or to get kind of in that happy bubble, even if you're maybe in a different one now.
Absolutely. Yeah. A lot of self-awareness, learning from our mistakes, learning about why we're responding in those ways. So even if we had a difficult childhood, we can eventually become a more secure individual and create a secure attachment with our children.
Yeah. Got it. Okay.
So
how does that tie in? Because there's obviously 3 more, and I'm sure you probably see maybe more folks kind of in the other 3. And the goal, I guess, maybe the personal goal for folks would be to get to that secure attachment realm if they're in the other quadrants.
Absolutely. Yeah. So the other 3 are going to be, again, the more disrupted. So when you think of the anxious preoccupied attachment, this is an individual who had parents that might have been available, but would intermittently not be available. So this would be, sometimes the child would be attended to, and so they would feel safe, but then other times they would cry and the primary caregiver wouldn't give them that attention. And again, this is to the extreme. It's not just like, oh, one time they cried and, the caregiver wasn't there. This is like they were gone a lot, and so they weren't physically present to be able to give them that security. So people with anxious preoccupied tend to develop a dependency on other people. So
like codependent, kind of?
Codependence,
okay.
Yeah. They really need maybe more validation from their partner. They might have insecurities and feelings of not being good enough. They tend to have a very negative view of themselves and a fear of abandonment. Because if you think about it, of, having that, sometimes that person is there and then other times they wouldn't be, this creates this fear that I can't trust in a relationship, that they're always going to be there for me when I need it. So the way that this translates to somebody with money is that somebody in an anxious preoccupied may be totally healthy with money, but they also tend to be more hyper aware of their money situation because they're very much thinking about, not only their relationship with people, but also finances, all of that, which comes from insecurity. We tend to be a little bit more anxious, a little bit more aware of like what's going on in our lives. So this can be a healthy relationship with money, but also it can create with that lack of confidence, they might be over worried about their finances, way less willing to spend, maybe to the point where they're just holding everything very tight. And then if you think about that too, they might be very fearful about how their partner is spending, having expectations that their partner might take care of them more financially because they're so concerned about that trust. And so they're over analyzing how all that spending is going.
But it's kind of like coming from like a person coming from a place of lack to a certain degree, right? They're
Exactly.
always kind of going in that same mindset.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So they're really, and unsure, is a really great word for this. They're just feeling unsure about a lot of things, about themselves, about their relationships, and about their finances.
Fascinating. Fascinating. So then we still have two more.
We do, yes. So the next is avoidant dismissive. So avoidant dismissive, again, it's exactly what it sounds like, is that the primary caregiver is more avoidant in giving care, security, all of that. They might be more dismissive. They're not as present with the child. And so as an adult, this actually turns into who is fiercely independent to the point where they don't like developing relationships with other people. So they really avoid depending on others. They avoid any emotional attachment. And so this is an individual who in a relationship may seem emotionally unavailable or guarded. So the way that translates to finances is they tend to keep themselves very closed off with financial opportunities. They're not as willing to take advice because they're much more fiercely independent. They might insist on keeping finances separate from their partner. I really don't like the idea of having, combined bank accounts or feeling comfortable with having that equality in money. It's very much like, this is my money and you have your own thing. They also might have an overconfidence with finances to the point where it's like, I don't need anybody's help. So I'm just going to do, what I think is best with my money, which sometimes can result in poor spending habits and not being as safe with their money.
So interesting that you say that, because I definitely noticed within my career, more so, it appears that some couples are keeping things very separate. And I'm finding it mainly couples who have had a significant relationship with a partner some point in their life that didn't work out, transition into another relationship or another relationship even after that, and want to keep things compartmentalized and separate, probably because of the lack of that trust. But I feel like that almost falls within that category.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. So money trauma, we might call it. And so this can come from either your childhood or it can come from, unhealthy relationship. So again, our attachment styles shift as we go through our lives. So somebody who might have had a secure attachment style got into an unhealthy relationship where, that person was very anxious or very avoidant. They might be much more protective of themselves. And so then they move into more of that avoidant dismissive attachment style in their next relationship. It's kind of this learned behavior where it's like, okay, I can't trust people. I thought I could, as a child, I learned I could, but now I've learned that I can't. So that shift happens and they might be much more or much less willing to share their finances with their partner.
How fluid are these attachment styles? Because I feel like from what you're sharing, I mean, you can start in one, end up in another, come back to the same one. I mean, it sounds like there's some fluidity that's happening there too.
Yeah, it's all very dependent on how we experience relationships. And again, if we have awareness behind it and we can notice how we're viewing the world and others differently, then we have a little bit more control over, that fluctuation. And we can stay more in that secure attachment style, understanding that, it's not my fault. This is not, the whole world is because of this relationship. But it's maybe we aren't as aware of that, especially when we're younger and in younger relationships. And then we have a really unhealthy one, then it can absolutely shift. The older we get and the more secure we get in ourselves, the less that it's going to be, fluid and flexible. But if we go through life and we don't learn these lessons, we don't attend to these mistakes or to this awareness of how, one relationship was not providing us what we needed, then we probably are going to have a little bit more of that fluidity between the attachment styles.
Kind of going back to the thought process, right? If you don't learn it the first time, it comes back in a lesson somewhere else in your life.
Totally. Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting to see how these things can progress and change. And sometimes, we attend to things in a very healthy way and we learn from it, or we continue, or we, shut down or shut off and might be attending to it in a very unhealthy way. So it just really depends. So the last one, the disorganized, the fearful, avoidant. So this is where it might have even been unsafe for the child. This is, instances of maybe more abuse or neglect. So it tends to be a little bit more severe. So this is a very confusing experience for a child because they never know when they're safe or if they'll ever be safe. So this turns into an adult who might really struggle with not understanding feelings or emotions, relationships, just not having a sense of trust. They'll be conflicted between really wanting to be loved and being very fearful of being loved and trusting love. So then the way that this comes out in money is there's very low confidence in their ability to manage their finances. So they might avoid it altogether. Like they just I don't want to even think about finances. It can prevent them from even thriving financially because they're just not paying any attention to it. This is also maybe, the people that have just really disorganized system for finances because thinking about it and looking at it is just too stressful. And they don't want to worry about it because they just don't know what it feels like to be stable and to have that stability. So they almost thrive in chaos, or rather not thrive, but they just exist in chaos because that's the life that they had growing up. Or even if they're coming from a very abusive relationship, that can also create a disorganized attachment style because that trauma creates a very fearful, experience. And so therefore, their life, they're just trying to hold on and trying to get through life with all of this extra trauma that they've had to deal with.
So not only money kind of relationship examples like you've shared, but it seems, is there also a communication style that goes with these different attachments as well? How these folks, depending on kind of what sector you're in, how they communicate openly or not openly?
Yes, absolutely. So somebody was secure. They're very, good at expressing their emotions. They don't blame things on others. They're just able to talk about their emotions and be aware and empathetic to the other person. For anxious and preoccupied, this you think of literally somebody with anxiety who might be over worried about how the person is thinking about them. And so they might, unintentionally be very I want to say overly self-aware, where they're just, worrying all the time how, what they're doing or what their partner is doing and reading too much into situations. And so their communication might come off sometimes as needy or just very, very anxious. Avoidant or dismissive is going to be much more I'm not talking about my emotions. No, I'm not going there. This is your fault. Very shut down, shut off, does not want to have that healthy communication because they just don't want to dig deep or open up too much. And then the disorganized and fearful avoidant is very, as it says, just disorganized, not knowing how they feel about something. So trying to communicate with an individual who might have a disorganized attachment style would be difficult because they aren't really sure how they're feeling about things. They're just very fearful.
If someone who's listening is kind of falling into one of these categories and it's oh gosh, how do I even think about beginning to navigate through? what would you share to folks that maybe are hearing this thinking, oh yeah, that's totally definable as me. Like, how do I, make the best version of myself?
Absolutely. Well, first, I want to normalize it that, this is not in any sense a criticism because we all, we never had control over, especially our first relationship with our caregiver. So if there was, a less than desirable childhood, that's not your fault. And so what we can do moving forward, or even, an abusive relationship or an unhealthy relationship, none of this is our fault that we're behaving this way. This is our reaction to the world and we are just trying to survive. So if this does bring up anything for you, I would highly recommend that you do either your own research on it, but absolutely consider talking to a therapist or a mental health professional because they can help navigate and help you to discover what attachment style you might be and why. Where is this coming from and how can we navigate that to get you into a more secure relationship with yourself and secure relationship with your partner?
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you for sharing all that too. I find that fascinating because we all fall in one and sometimes we overlap in others.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, thank you again for your time. And thank you all for listening or watching, however you're with us today. This is the Platinum Talks Wealth podcast.
If you enjoyed today's podcast, Platinum Talks Wealth, please subscribe and share. For more information about Jennifer Rogers Markwell or Platinum Wealth Management, please visit www.platinumwealth.net. Securities and advisory services offered through LPL Financial, a registered investment advisor, member of FINRA and SIPC. The opinions voiced in this podcast are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. To determine which strategies or investments may be suitable for you, consult the appropriate qualified professional prior to making a decision. The guest speakers and their companies are not affiliated with or endorsed by LPL Financial or Platinum Wealth Management.